We had a group called the Opposite Six while I was in high school. This one promoter, he'd hire us to back up different artists. We backed up the Dovells, we backed up the Righteous Brothers, Gerry McGee, and all these players that ended up playing with Leon at some point in the game. Wrecking Crew guys. Glen Campbell, I think, played on some of it. The Cats. Probably Leon played. I wouldn't doubt if Leon played on some of it. And then Phil Spector hooked up with them and they did You've Lost That Love and Feeling. And boom, took off like a shot. Backing these guys up was really a great learning thing. We learned a lot of how to stage stuff and how to really put on a show. One of the groups we backed up was a group called Dick and Dee Dee. They did a song called Mountains High. The mountains high and the valley so deep. Check it, like that song. Turns out Leon was the section leader on that song, and he was the guy that says, why don't you take the tom-tom off its stand, put it on the snare, and just goes yagga-dagga-da. And I was going, this is brilliant. It's what sold the record. Sometimes at those days, what made a record happen was the right place. It had nothing to do with the song, the singer, the arrangements. It had to do with the placement of the slapstick. And Leon understood those kind of things. You know, like what's a hook other than the obvious hook of the song? What I really loved about Leon in a lot of ways is when we did this first tour with him, he was hot as a pistol. And it was right around the time he had the Gap Band pretty much backing him up. And those guys, you know, Wilson Brothers, all those guys, monsters, you know. And I think he had Chuck Blackwell playing drums in addition to the Gap's drummer. But his generosity was ridiculous. He gave us as much of the stage as we wanted. He offered us his crew if we needed him, as much monitor space, his wedges, all of that stuff was right there. He said, you got it the same way we got it. We're all in this together. And I just even asked him one time, I said, you know, most headliners give you about a postage stamp because they don't want to be bothered changing the set. He said, yeah, but we're all musicians. So if I got it, you got it. Simple as that. That was, wow. Big star, still got humble, you know, still got humility, and still helping the next guy. Which I took that as like, well, you learn from this. And he gave Charlie like 4 songs in the set. People didn't know who he was, but they sure did after they heard him sing. Charlie Wilson's to this day, is one of the best singers on the earth. Screamer, bad boy, bad news. Sweet guy. We did a couple, you know, because we were going out on the road with him. And I was talking to him, where are you coming from? I said, well, I came up in the church. And my dad made me start practicing for my solo on Sunday, on Tuesday. And I had to, you know, do a couple of hours of practicing every day. So it made me crazy, hated it. Why I'm still singing, I have no idea. Whatever it was, he sure came out one screamingly great singer. First of all, Leon was really good to us, and then there was one point where we were all driving, you know, driving to the gigs. We had our equipment truck, and because we were doing some gigs that weren't with Leon. I mean, Leon would take a break for a week, and we'd go out and play some clubs because we were out there. I mean, you're better to play than it is to not. So we'd do fillers ourselves. We had a PA system. Now we get into Albuquerque, New Mexico, and they're ready to set up. Shoko was the PA company that Leon was using for the tour. Their trucks got broken down up in the Rockies somewhere, and they couldn't get there in time. When you postpone a gig like that, it just costs you a fortune, because you got to go back and do the tickets, and then you have all the hotels, the travel, everything, again. So at some point, you know, I said, hey, Leon, we got a PA in the truck. It might not be as good as Shoko's, but it'll do the trick. So we set up the PA for him, and the show went on. Probably saved Leon 50 grand. Did a tour with him at one point, and he did Holiday for Strings. You know, we breaking into songs, taps, whatever the song was, and all of a sudden he's going 4 octaves. I was just going, that is chops for days, you know. He's a great piano player, and it wasn't until later I realized what a wonderful writer he was, a great singer. My band was pitched Lady Blue, and I kind of didn't get it. I said, who is this? I said, this is Leon. This is kind of a cool tune for him. It wasn't going to be right for me at that time. If he'd have pitched me Masquerade or Song for You, it had been a different story. I'd have grabbed it in a second. But Lady Blue is a little bit of a different kind of thing. But I mean, I kept the demo for years and played it pretty regularly. Wow. Then he kind of went away for a while. Next thing you know, George Benson's got Masquerade out. Donny Hathaway's got Song for You. Carpenter's got Superstar. I mean, all of a sudden there's Leon's not doing. I mean, the same thing kind of happened with Barry Gibb and the Gibb brothers, the Bee Gees. They didn't want to do Saturday Night Live. They just said, well, if we got to do this, let's go ahead and do it. And boom, they just became giant disco stars. And then when the backlash happened against disco, it happened against them. They kept writing, and Barry just produced Streisand, produced all kinds of other stuff. And they kept going, it's just in a different way. You can't hold back radical talent. You just can't. There's musicians out there. There's a group called Dirty Loops. Have you ever heard of these guys? Look them up. They're amazing. They started doing YouTubes of covers of Britney Spears songs, but they just, you know, Herbie Hancock the hell out of the songs. I mean, it was kind of hard to find a song in it, but the way they did it, and then Jonah's singing is just ridiculous. There's another kid, I think he's English, Jacob Collier. Oh, wow, forget it. There's some young players coming up that they don't have quite the fame and fortune system that the record companies used to give to artists. A lot of them very deserving artists, but they are so good that you can't, it's like the cream always rises to the top. Eventually, it might take longer because you don't have A&R staff. Lord knows you've seen a Tower Records or Licorice Pizza or Warehouse around anywhere. There's very little commerce. I mean, visible commerce in the music business anymore. If somebody's making an album now, it's because they love the record. We were doing a CWF tour in Sweden, Norway, Denmark, pretty much Scandinavia. We might have swung down into Germany, maybe. We were co-billing with Leon Russell on these dates, and this was maybe 4 years before he passed. You know, he was in a wheelchair, and I think between then and when he passed, he did that record with Elton, which was great, because Elton was, EJ was digging him. Man, this is one of the guys I've, you know, looked after. So he kind of kept Leon up and running. And it was so amazing. He was just such a sweetie pie. He's a wonderful guy. He's one of those guys, you look at him and it's just all music. Every millimeter of his persona, of his stuff was just music. It's like with, you remember George Duke? I went to high school with George Duke, and then he had a song called Sweet Baby with him and Stanley Clarke. It was a big #1 record. And George produced all the Jeffrey Osborne records. He produced Denise Williams, Let's Hear It for the Boys. He produced a lot of really good records. And he was highly successful. I knew him when he was in high school, and he was highly talented. And when he passed, somebody said, well, George was a big this and this, that, and the other thing. I said, I knew George since I was in 7th grade. And George was always who George always was. And I think Leon was always who Leon always was. He's the same guy. Sometimes success turns you into a different guy. You might need to have a little more space. You might need to be more careful about who you're friends with, because they may be working you, because you're making money. People want it. Simple as that. But other than that, he seems like he was just, every millimeter of his heart, soul, and body was music. I love him for that. There's just something great about it.